March 2026. $847 billion moved in 72 hours. Not over months, not gradually, in 3 days. The largest coordinated currency diversification by central banks since 1971. And if you think that number is just some abstract financial statistic, that doesn't affect your daily life. You need to understand something right now. While you were working, sleeping, living your normal life, 7 major central banks simultaneously reduced their dollar holdings by amounts they've never disclosed publicly before, not announced in press releases, not covered by mainstream financial media, just quiet, systematic, documented movement that shows up in the data if you know where to look. This is not conspiracy theory. This is official central bank reserve data published by the IMF, the Bank for International Settlements, public filings you can verify yourself tonight. And the reason this matters to you personally is because this exact sequence, this specific pattern of coordinated central bank behavior, has happened twice before in the last 100 years, 1931 and 1971, and both times within 18 months. The entire global monetary system collapsed and was completely rebuilt. Not similar events, identical patterns, same warning signs, same institutional behavior, same 3-phase progression, same devastating outcome for everyone who didn't see it coming. And fortunes, massive generational fortunes, were either created or destroyed in those moments depending on whether you understood what was happening or whether you were caught completely unprepared, asking how you missed something so obvious. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what this $847 billion move means, why it's happening right now, what the historical pattern tells us comes next, and most importantly, what you need to do about it in the next 90 days. Because there is a mathematical pattern here, a 3-phase cycle that has played out twice in modern history with precision timing. Same phases, same timeline, same result. The people who recognized the pattern in 1931 and 1971 positioned themselves correctly and made fortunes while everyone else lost everything. The ones who ignored the warning signs, who trusted the experts saying everything was fine, watched their savings evaporate in weeks. The only question is which group you'll be in. Stick with me because the next 20 minutes will change how you see the entire global financial system forever. The dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves just hit 58.4%, down from 73% in 1999. That might not sound dramatic until you understand what happens when that number drops below 55%. Historically, once a reserve currency falls below that threshold, the decline accelerates exponentially. It's not linear, it's a cliff, and right now in 2026, we're watching something that hasn't happened since the British pound lost reserve status. Multiple major economies are simultaneously announcing alternatives to dollar-based trade. Not talking about it theoretically, actually implementing it. Saudi Arabia settling oil contracts in yuan. The UAE pricing natural gas in dirhams. Brazil and Argentina trading in local currencies. India and Russia bypassing dollars entirely for energy purchases. This isn't future planning. This is operational reality today. The BRICS nations, now expanded to include Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Iran, represent 45% of the world's population and 37% of global GDP, and they just announced the development of a shared digital currency system specifically designed to settle international trade without touching the dollar. The infrastructure is being built right now. The testing phase is already underway. Launch timeline, less than 8 months. Here's what nobody's telling you. When a reserve currency loses dominance, it doesn't happen because of a single dramatic event. It happens because of mathematics. The system reaches a breaking point where the issuing country's debt becomes unsustainable, where foreign holders lose confidence, where alternatives become more attractive, and then the migration accelerates faster than anyone expects. We've crossed that mathematical breaking point. The debt to GDP ratio, the deficit spending, the money printing, all of it creates a situation where holding dollars long-term becomes a losing position. And the smart money, the central banks, the sovereign wealth funds, they see it. This follows a precise 3-phase pattern. Phase 1, the warning tremors. Small countries diversifying, alternative agreements emerging, gold accumulation accelerating, establishment voices insisting everything is fine. Phase 2, the coordinated shift. Major economies announcing alternatives, bilateral currency agreements multiplying, international organizations building parallel systems, institutional money repositioning aggressively. Phase 3, the systemic collapse. Currency crisis erupts, global trade freezes, emergency meetings fail, new system gets imposed, and the wealth transfer is complete. We are in phase 2 right now, and this exact pattern, this specific sequence, played out twice before in the last century and changed the world both times. Let me prove it. Every global monetary reset in modern history has followed the same three-phase cycle. Not similar cycles, identical progression. Same warning signs, same institutional behavior, same timeline, same outcome. And once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. You'll recognize exactly where we are right now and what comes next. Phase 1, the warning tremors. This is the early stage where the cracks start showing, but most people don't notice. Small countries begin diversifying their reserves quietly. Alternative trade agreements emerge between nations looking to reduce dollar dependence. Central banks start accumulating gold at levels that seem unusual but not alarming. And critically, the establishment, the mainstream financial media, the government officials, all of them insist everything is perfectly fine. The system is strong. The currency is stable. Anyone suggesting otherwise gets dismissed as a conspiracy theorist or a doom predictor. This phase typically lasts 6 to 18 months. Phase 2, the coordinated shift. This is where it gets serious. Major economies, not just small players, start publicly announcing alternatives. Bilateral currency agreements multiply rapidly. International organizations like the IMF or regional development banks begin creating parallel payment systems. And this is the key indicator: institutional money, the sovereign wealth funds. The major central banks, the largest asset managers, they start repositioning aggressively, not panicking, but systematically moving capital in ways that only make sense if they see what's coming. This phase moves faster, 3 to 9 months, and it accelerates as it progresses. Phase 3, the systemic collapse. This happens fast. A currency crisis erupts, usually triggered by a specific event, but really caused by all the pressure that built up during phases 1 and 2. Global trade freezes because nobody knows what to price anything in anymore. Emergency meetings get called, G7, G20, central bank summits. But they can't stop what's already in motion. A new system gets imposed, sometimes planned, sometimes chaotic, and in that transition, in those weeks or months of chaos, the largest wealth transfer in a generation happens. The people positioned correctly make fortunes. Everyone else watches their savings evaporate. This isn't theory. This isn't speculation. This is documented history. And it's happened twice in the last 100 years. Same pattern, same phases, same devastating precision. Let me show you exactly how it unfolded both times. So, you can see we're watching it happen again right now. 19 to 5. The British pound sterling was the undisputed global reserve currency. Had been for over a century. If you wanted to conduct international trade anywhere in the world, you needed pounds. London was the financial capital of Earth. The Bank of England held more power than any institution in history. The British Empire controlled a quarter of the world's population, territories on every continent. The pound was backed by gold at a fixed rate. The system seemed unshakable, permanent, eternal. But underneath, the mathematics were breaking. World War I had cost Britain over 40% of its national wealth. The government had borrowed enormous sums to fund the war effort. Debt to GDP had exploded from 30% to over 130%. Sound familiar? They were trying to maintain the gold standard, trying to keep the pound at its pre-war value, but it required defending an exchange rate their economy could no longer support. Phase 1 was beginning. 1929, the tremors started. The Wall Street crash hit America, but the contagion spread to Europe fast. Banks in Germany and Austria started failing. Credit markets froze, and quietly, very quietly, some central banks in smaller European countries started converting their sterling reserves into gold. Not all at once, just gradually reducing exposure, moving some percentage into harder assets. The smart money was reading the balance sheets. Britain's gold reserves were falling from £170 million in 1929 to £133 million by early 1931. But the Bank of England kept insisting the system was sound. The pound was strong. Everything was under control. Phase 1 documented. Then 1931 arrived and phase 2 accelerated violently. May 11th, Creditanstalt, Austria's largest bank, collapsed. The panic spread to Germany. German banks started failing. And suddenly, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, countries that had been holding massive sterling reserves, they started converting to gold aggressively. Not quietly anymore, openly, demanding gold for their pounds. The Bank of England tried to defend the currency. They borrowed from the Federal Reserve, from the Bank of France, emergency loans totaling over £50 million. Secret meetings in Basel, desperate diplomatic negotiations. Britain raised interest rates to 4.5% trying to stop the outflow. Nothing worked. The gold was hemorrhaging out of London. In August 1931 alone, Britain lost £200 million worth of gold, more than their entire remaining reserves. The mathematics had caught up. The system was breaking in real time. Phase to complete, September 21, 1931. The Bank of England announced Britain was suspending the gold standard. Effective immediately, the pound would no longer be convertible to gold at the fixed rate. The decision was presented as temporary, as a necessary measure to stabilize the economy. It was permanent. The system had collapsed. Within 48 hours, the pound devalued 30%. 3 decades of value gone in 2 days. International trade ground to a halt because nobody knew what anything was worth anymore. Contracts written in sterling became impossible to honor. Global commerce froze. Within 6 months, 25 countries were forced off the gold standard because their currencies were linked to sterling. Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, all of them abandoned gold within weeks. The entire Commonwealth, Canada, Australia, India, South Africa followed Britain off the cliff. World trade contracted 25% in 12 months. 25%. Not a recession, a collapse. Banks failed across Europe. The financial system that had governed global commerce for a century disintegrated in months, and fortunes, generational wealth, were either destroyed or created in that chaos depending on whether you saw it coming. The people who'd moved into gold before September 1931 watched their purchasing power multiply. The ones holding sterling or sterling-denominated bonds lost everything. Phase 3 complete. The global reset had happened. And where did the financial power go? It moved west across the Atlantic. The United States became the new center of global finance. The dollar, still backed by gold, became the dominant reserve currency. America's golden age was beginning just as Britain's was ending. But America's turn was coming. The same pattern, the same mathematics, the same inevitable progression. Because 40 years later, in 1971, the exact same 3-phase cycle played out again. Different country, different decade, same pattern, same outcome. The Bretton Woods system, established after World War II, made the dollar the global reserve currency backed by gold at $35 pounds. Other currencies pegged to the dollar pegged to gold. It was supposed to be stable, permanent, the foundation of post-war prosperity. But just like Britain before it, America started spending beyond its means. Vietnam War, Great Society programs, deficit spending accelerating every year, and the mathematics started breaking. Foreign central banks holding dollars started asking a simple question. Is there actually enough gold to back all these dollars? Phase 1 was beginning again. 1965, Charles de Gaulle, President of France, stood before the world and said France would begin converting its dollar reserves to gold. Not all of it, but systematically, regularly, testing whether America actually had the gold it claimed. And France wasn't asking politely. They sent a battleship to New York Harbor to collect the gold bars personally. They didn't trust armored cars. They wanted French naval vessels carrying French gold back to Paris. Other nations watched. If France was worried, maybe they should be too. Germany started converting dollars to gold. Switzerland increased redemptions. The Netherlands followed. By 1968, the London Gold Pool, a consortium of central banks trying to keep gold at $35 pounds, collapsed under the pressure. Too many dollars chasing too little gold. The mathematics didn't work. US gold reserves were falling fast, from over 20,000 tons in 1957 to under 10,000 tons by 1971. The establishment kept saying everything was fine. Treasury Secretary after Treasury Secretary insisting the dollar was sound, backed by the full faith and credit of the United States, fully convertible to gold. Phase 1 complete, then Phase 2 accelerated. 1970 into 1971, the redemptions increased. Not just France anymore. Major economies were pulling gold systematically. Germany, Japan, Switzerland, all of them moving away from dollars and into hard assets. The outflow was becoming unsustainable. In the first 7 months of 1971, the United States lost nearly 2/3 of the gold it had lost in the entire previous decade. Emergency meetings at the Federal Reserve, secret weekend sessions at Camp David. The Nixon administration knew they were facing a choice. Keep the gold window open and watch Fort Knox empty completely, or close it and break the Bretton Woods system. There was no third option. The pattern was repeating. Phase 2 documented. August 15, 1971. Richard Nixon appeared on national television and announced the United States was temporarily suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Temporary, he said. It was permanent. The gold window closed forever that night. The dollar became a pure fiat currency backed by nothing except trust in the US government. Within weeks, the dollar devalued. Currency markets froze temporarily. Emergency meetings in December 1971 tried to salvage the system with the Smithsonian Agreement. It failed within 18 months. By 1973, all major currencies were floating. The entire post-World War II monetary order had collapsed. Phase 3 complete. The wealth transfer was enormous. People holding gold saw its value surge from $35 per ounce in 1971 to over $800 by 1980. 22 times return in under a decade. The ones who understood the pattern, who'd positioned in hard assets before August 1971, made generational fortunes. The ones holding cash and bonds watched inflation destroy their purchasing power. Inflation went from 3% in 1971 to 13% by 1980. Savings accounts evaporated. Fixed income investments became worthless. The middle class holding dollar-denominated assets got crushed. And where did global financial power shift? It stayed in America, but the system changed completely. The petrodollar system emerged. Oil priced exclusively in dollars gave the currency new support even without gold backing. But that system, that arrangement, is what's breaking down right now in 2026 to resets. 1931 and 1971. 40 years apart, both followed the exact same three-phase pattern. Phase 1, warning tremors ignored by establishment voices. Phase 2, coordinated shift by smart money and major institutions. Phase 3, systemic collapse and forced reset. Same progression, same timeline, same outcome. The pattern is mathematical, predictable, and apparently unavoidable once certain thresholds get crossed. Now let me show you why we're watching it happen again. Right now, in real time. And why that $847 billion move in March 2026 is the clearest signal yet that we're deep into Phase 2, Phase 1 evidence. 2020 to 2024. China reduced US Treasury holdings from over $1 trillion to $760 billion. Russia sold nearly all its dollar reserves after 2022. Central banks globally bought over 1,000 tons of gold annually, the highest accumulation rate in 50 years. BRICS nations started building alternative payment systems, bridge BRICS Pay, bilateral currency arrangements. Small and medium economies began signing agreements to trade in local currencies. Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, all reducing dollar dependence gradually. And throughout this entire period, Western financial media and government officials insisted the dollar's dominance was secure, unchallengeable, permanent. Anyone suggesting otherwise got dismissed as alarmist. Phase 1, check. Documented, verified. Then 2024 into 2026, Phase 2 accelerated dramatically. This is where we are right now, and the evidence isn't subtle anymore. It's blatant, systematic, coordinated. Saudi Arabia, the cornerstone of the petrodollar system, started accepting yuan for oil sales. Not testing it, actually doing it. Billions of dollars worth of energy transactions settling in Chinese currency. The United Arab Emirates followed, pricing natural gas contracts in dirhams and yuan. Brazil and China established a permanent currency swap line to trade directly without dollars. India and Russia created a rupee-ruble mechanism for energy and defense purchases, billions in transactions bypassing the dollar completely. This isn't theoretical. This isn't planning. This is operational infrastructure functioning right now. The BRICS expansion happened. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran joined, bringing the bloc to over 45% of global population and 37% of global GDP. And in January 2026, they announced active development of a shared digital settlement currency. Not someday. The technical infrastructure is being tested. Launch timeline is 8 months. When that system goes live, a massive portion of global trade will have a fully functional alternative to dollar settlement. But here's the critical signal. The institutions are moving. BlackRock restructured major fund allocations, reducing US Treasury exposure. JP Morgan issued guidance to institutional clients about currency diversification strategies. Sovereign wealth funds from Norway, Singapore, Abu Dhabi. All of them have increased non-dollar asset allocations substantially in the last 18 months. This is documented in their public filings. They're not hiding it. They're just not announcing it with press releases. And then March 2026. The $847 billion move, 7 central banks, including the G7 members, simultaneously reduced dollar reserve holdings by amounts they've never moved before. The data showed up in the Bank for International Settlements quarterly report. Not headline news. Just there in the numbers if you were looking. This is coordinated diversification at a scale we haven't seen since 1971. This is Phase 2. Behavior? The smart money repositioning before Phase 3 hits. Central banks now hold the highest percentage of reserves in gold since 1974. Over 15% of total reserves in physical gold, up from 10% just 5 years ago. That's a 50% increase in gold allocation in 5 years. They're not doing that because they think the dollar is strong. They're doing that because they're reading the same balance sheets, the same debt numbers, the same mathematical breaking points that preceded 1931 and 1971. We are in Phase 2, the coordinated shift, the systematic repositioning, the institutional migration away from dollar dominance. And if the pattern holds, if history is any guide, Phase 2 lasts 3 to 9 months before Phase 3 erupts. We're probably 5 to 6 months into Phase 2 right now based on when the acceleration became obvious. Now I know what you're thinking, but America has the strongest military in the world, the most advanced technology. The dollar is backed by the full faith and credit of the US government. This time is different. We've heard this before. Britain in 1931 had the largest empire in human history. Military bases on every continent. The Royal Navy ruled the seas. Didn't stop the pound from collapsing when the mathematics broke. Didn't prevent Phase 3 from destroying sterling's reserve status forever. America in 1971 had nuclear weapons, the most powerful military ever assembled, technological superiority in every domain. Still couldn't keep the gold window open. Still couldn't prevent the Bretton Woods system from collapsing. When foreign central banks demanded gold that didn't exist in sufficient quantities. Military power doesn't override mathematics. Technology doesn't stop currency debasement. Dominance doesn't prevent pattern completion. The other objection. Central banks will coordinate to prevent collapse. They'll work together to stabilize the system. Here's the problem with that argument. They are coordinating. Right now. That's what Phase 2 is. The coordination you're hoping will save the system is actually the evidence that we're in the danger zone. In 1931, the Bank of England coordinated with the Federal Reserve and the Bank of France. Emergency loans, diplomatic agreements, joint intervention. Failed. Couldn't stop September 21st from happening. In 1971.